That's all we need.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host Alex, and with me I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Doing well, thanks, Alex. Good to be back, and obviously a lot happening in the club at the moment, and obviously a huge FA Cup fixture that we get to talk about today, which some ways brought about a mixed feeling. Sometimes with those cup games, you don't get too excited. Although, given the fact Everton are a Premier League club, there was a little bit more hype around this one, but with all of the smoke and mirrors and selling of the club and all the other events that are going on, it's just it seems like a really busy and big time for the club at the moment.
Yeah, it's been I was chatting to Dan last week about the busy festive period, which kind of ended up being a bit of a fizzer in the sense that we had a couple of games postponed, but it seems to have ended with a bit of a bang with this FA Cup game against Everton. And as you say, I mean, it's always a bit of a buzz playing a Premier League side anyway. And it's sort of in two minds of it's a winnable tie in the sense that, I mean, I guess Everton were in pretty poor form in the Premier League before the game, had a couple of injuries as well. I mean, we saw Calvert-Lewin and a few others ruled out of this game as well. And then, of course, you go and score after less than a minute as well. It really sets up some pretty high expectations for what can come in the game, which, it's the hope that kills you, I guess. It's that sense that maybe we can actually go out and win this game, and it wasn't to be. But yeah, I'll get your thoughts first of all on the game overall, what you thought of how we played, whether the result was a fair one, and just your overall thoughts.
Yeah, look, the very first thing that is kind of, I know you asked specifically about the game, but just from a fan's perspective, to see the amount of people back at the KCOM and just
how good was it? Yeah,
it's just. I mean, I saw a few pictures that people had posted on Twitter, and people lining up on the bridge and being stuck in a queue to kind of get back into the ground. And I know that that's something we haven't seen for quite some time. So with everything else aside from the actual game itself, just to see that and the warming pitches to come through. It's a real turning point, and just a really optimistic feeling that exists in the club at the moment, and to see fans getting excited about returning to football at the ground again. I think that in itself was probably the most motivating aspect, and then the fact that the players were able to put in the performance that they did really just topped it off. The game specifically, as you said, it was the hope that kills you when you score 45 seconds into a cup tie against the Premier League club on your home pitch. It kind of reminds me of some of the really warm memories that we've had in the Premier League, beating Liverpool at the KCOM twice, and those dreamland moments. Although, granted, respectfully, it is only Everton in comparison to some of the other clubs that we have experienced some fantastic results against at the KCOM. But the fact that, we find ourselves towards the tail end of the championship and we're playing a very powerful club in the likes of Everton. So a great performance to score twice against them, to really push them. And, we could have still won that game in normal time. We came very close in injury time, and there's the fighting spirit, to get back into the game and then to almost take it. It's just a really good performance, and I know we'll talk about it, but the Lungman goal was just outstanding. I think
he's making a habit of it. Yeah,
it really is. But just to have a highlight like that from the game as well, and I think that the momentum that goal specifically generated, there's just such a positive sign, or there's some really positive signs around, and seeing goals like that, really not only kind of speak to the performance, but it really does help lift the spirits of all the fans who did go, make their way to the ground and see that goal live, and see us push Everton the whole way. I think that only speaks in a promising manner to what lies ahead in the immediate future for the club.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you touched on the crowd there, and I was having a think about it. I feel like the biggest two crowds that we've had since relegation from the Premier League have come in the FA Cup, because we had that, I want to say maybe 22,000 against Chelsea a couple of seasons ago, which was, ironically, I mean, it was almost a false dawn, because it was, we're sitting a point outside the playoffs. Bowen and Grzycki at the peak of their powers, almost a sellout against Chelsea in the FA Cup. I think we lost 2-1 in that game, and you think, how good's this? We're really kind of going to kick on from here. And it was almost literally the next day that Bowen and Grzycki were sold. And you feel like with this one, it's actually a promising dawn of a new era, because of course we had Acun Ilicali in the crowd, who I think there was an interview that he did with the Hull Daily Mail that was released overnight, saying how impressed he was with the side, how impressed he was with the players, how passionate they're playing with. And as you say, I mean, we're sitting just outside the relegation zone in the Championship, and I'm sure a lot of people would have watched this game and thought, how is this side in any danger in the Championship, given the way that they've played in this game? As you say, I mean, it is only Everton, so to speak, but they're a club that spent a lot of money over the last few seasons on their squad. Granted, this season they weren't able to spend as much with financial fair play, and ironically, it was Demarai Gray, who was one of their cheaper signings, who was the first to score in this one. But they've got a Premier League quality all through that side, so it was a hugely impressive effort from the side to get as close as they did. And I like to think it's almost perfect, because I would say that Lewis Potter and Greaves, whilst they had good games, weren't the sort of standout players that they have been on other days. So you think everyone's watching this game, and they maybe didn't take as much notice of those players, so we can sort of keep them in our back pocket.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's always a worry when you're on national television and all eyes are on that particular fixture. And yeah, we know what both of those players are capable of, and we're assuming that they come with quite a price tag. Hopefully, they aren't sold, and they are a part of the immediate future and maybe long-term future of the club. But yeah, you're exactly right. If there was ever a night where we could compete and yet not reveal the real strength of our side week in, week out, it was quite nice for those two to be somewhat quieter than normal and reach the heights that we know they are capable of.
That's right. And it was a pretty full strength side that we put out. I think it was just Elder out from the previous game for, I guess it was Elder out for Smith, really, or I guess you'd say Randall Williams coming in as well. And I think the other out was Longman, of course. So he started on the bench. Pretty full strength side. And we'll talk a little bit later on about Josh Magennis' future at the club, but we, of course, saw Tom Eaves starting again up top. Actually, he might have been an in as well. I can't quite remember. But if every game that we played was a third round FA Cup game, Tom Eaves would be, up there with Messi and Ronaldo, I would say. I mean, he's just put in another up there with his game against, was it Rotherham, I think, in the FA Cup third round a couple of years ago. Just another terrific display. And it was just his touch, his passing, everything about his game. It wasn't any particular aspect. It was just, he was just on. He was up for it.
I think it's fair to say that I don't remember a time, certainly in the period that we've been supporting the club, that it's been a cult hero that could be more polarizing. Just some of the comments that you read about Tom Eaves and, labeled as a donkey and how he's not cut out, shouldn't be a footballer, but as well to just be so loved by the majority of the City fans. It's an incredible paradox. It's great to watch.
He reminds me a lot of Andy Carroll. I think one of the commentators made that comment, and it's that sort of player where he's that tall, lanky player who just throws himself around, who can have really clumsy off days or really mercurial, majestic days.
And you just always have that feeling with him as well, that there's just so much fight in him. He really wants to be at the club. He really wants to be a part of it, despite what, some of the critics have been pretty outspoken in voicing their opinion on him. So, I mean, fair play to him. He's got a huge level of resilience. And as you said, he's chalk and cheese, and rocks and diamonds is probably a better way to describe what you get with Tom Eaves on any given. But what an effort from him again. And it's just the hunger. I think that's probably what, the City fans are resonating with at the moment, and excited to watch Tom Eaves play, even though, as we said, he's certainly not the most naturally gifted footballer that's ever graced the City ranks.
That's right, yeah. And I guess the other big player to talk about from this game was Honeyman, and I guess in talking about Honeyman, we can talk about that first goal. Brilliantly whipped in free kick for Smith to get on the end of it. Short player up forward, getting on the end of that free kick and getting almost a free header into the goal was a brilliant way to start the game. But Honeyman, again, just a tremendous game from him. I think there was a passage late on where He put in a pretty poor free kick and then was the first one on his bike back to the defensive half to clear the ball out of play and stop an Everton attack. So just, from 0 to 90 was just putting in all the effort.
Yeah, and I guess that again, that's another thing that we've come to expect with George Honeyman, and I think that's probably why he's endeared himself to the City fans, because he's such an honest performer, and week in, week out, there's not a blade of grass that he doesn't cover on the pitch, and it's while ever he's there for the 90 plus minutes, the type of performance you'll get from him, and I think that as a working class club as we certainly are. It's definitely the type of guile and resilience that we need, and he typifies exactly what's required from a City player, but certainly a captain as well to lead the club that in the way that he does. He's a joy to watch, and as I mentioned before, a very exciting player to watch when he scores a goal. I think there's not a more excited man than George Honeyman when he nets one.
That's right. I mean, Tyler Smith did make a good case for that. He was what a way to get off the mark as a City player, to get his first goal for the club in the FA Cup first minute of the game was terrific for him.
And you have to wonder as well what it was like, for the players, given the fact that for the best part of I want to say 3 years or 3 seasons almost, they've been playing in front of next to nobody, and to have a KCOM that was essentially full. And to have the electric atmosphere that was certainly visible for us on the TV, cameras. Just wonder what that did for for them, and what it's kind of done to spike their motivation levels, and to score in front of a stadium that you're used to playing in, and to have the reaction and the response that he got. I think it can only speak volumes to Tyler Smith and what it's probably done for his confidence.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, there was a video someone put up, which I think must have been produced by the backroom staff, showing the players walking out onto the ground at the start of the game with the fireworks, well, not the fireworks, but the flames going off, the light show going on. It looked brilliant. And as you say, for these players, I mean, we've heard it before in player interviews when they've joined the club of saying, "Oh, I've wanted to join City because they're a big club." And we are, especially obviously in League One and now in the Championship, we are a reasonably big club, and we've got a great state-of-the-art stadium compared to a lot of the other grounds. And it's nights like that you really feel it. You feel like the light show, the flame work, the pyrotechnics, everything were just brilliant. And then to score after a minute would have just had the crowd on absolute, tenterhooks at the way the game was going. So I can only imagine for the players, as you say, for the better part of 3 years, haven't been able to play in big crowds. And I think Acun was saying in the interview as well that this shows what the possibilities are for the club. And it's about attracting those people back to go week in, week out during the season.
And we've talked about it previously as well, Alex, in the sense that when unfortunately COVID hit and there was the games where there was obviously no crowds for a long time, in so many ways, it probably played into our hands because every stadium was empty, as opposed to going to these places where, we'd be forced to travel to, almost full house, 30,000 seat capacity stadiums. And then for, fans to come and visit the KCOM, which is, essentially 20 plus thousand, and you've got, 6,000 or 7,000 there. It's a very different atmosphere, and certainly not an away ground to be feared. So, as you mentioned, the possibilities that can come from this takeover bid and the change in atmosphere, if we are able to get, the City fans and the pre-alum, the stay away fans back into seats, what will that actually do for the playing group at the moment, who will be, for many of them, as we've talked about with the changeover in our playing roster recently, going down the divisions and coming back up to play in front of a stadium that's almost full again. I think it would be a remarkable feeling.
Definitely. Well, with the other goals in the game as well, so Everton then took the lead 2-1, goals through Demarai Gray and also Andre Gomez. That second goal, how did you view that? Because I mean, for me, it seemed definitely a mistake from Bernard. His positioning was a bit strange, and then the way he attacked the ball as well, it was like he kind of led with his hip, which I thought was a bit odd. Just go for a header clear. But the other defenders as well just seemed sort of out of position for it. It seemed quite an easy goal for Everton to score.
Yeah, it did. I think it was one of those ones where you get caught in two minds, and I think that was probably the biggest thing for Bernardo. It was more of a decision-making thing, where he was neither here nor there. And I think that, as you said, I want to watch the replay. It certainly seemed a little bit too easy, which is disappointing given the start that we had. But yeah, look, I think if he had his time over again, he probably would have, made a far more, astute commitment to it. But yeah, look. It was done, and I think the most impressive part was to get back into the game.
That's right. Yeah, I was just going to say. I mean, it seemed that sort of game where we scored early, held out for a while, and then fell behind, and you think, oh well, we've given a good account of ourselves, but then Longman pops up with the equaliser not that long before the end of the game, I think, with a brilliant curled goal, sort of following up his effort from a few weeks ago. He certainly seems to like those goals, and I sort of hope, having had Acun there in the crowd, that he's looking at Longman and saying, let's get him in on a permanent deal, because it would be brilliant to be able to make that a permanent signing and get him here full time.
Absolutely. And I think that, as we mentioned before, with so much of the hype, I guess, that entering the championship did come around our front three last season, because we know, we saw what they were able to do at League One level. And I know that, again, you've got, I'm looking at the footnotes, and I know that we'll be talking about Magennis shortly, but, it was so much about Wilkes and Kane Lewis-Potter. And we know that Wilkes probably hasn't really got going this season. We know that Kane Lewis-Potter is certainly at championship level, and, it will do well to keep him. But Longman probably, for me, is the one who's come into those loan signings and really stood up and made a real case for, for a permanent contract. And I certainly have seen enough to hope, as you said, that that he's on the radar and that something can be done, because he does look like quite a player.
And then one of the other loan signings, Baxter, there's a bit of debate about this. I personally didn't see it as much as his fault for the winner from Townsend. I mean, maybe that's just me saying Townsend seems to score a lot of these sorts of long range screamer goals. And I'm still not convinced that on that replay, I can't see a deflection off Tom Huddleston's back that sort of swerves the ball off the boot. And because Baxter sort of gets wrong-footed on it and doesn't make as much of a save as he could have. How did you see it? Was it sort of the ball movement through the air, or should Baxter have been better positioned?
I think it was the ball movement through the air. I just don't know if there was enough of it. I think, I think Baxter probably should have done better, if I'm perfectly honest with you. But with that being said, it's very difficult to, from this side of the equation, to watch it in front of a full house at the KCOM. I mean, Baxter's been brilliant for us for the last couple of months, and I think he certainly warranted that spot, ahead of Ingram, and just. It's one of those ones that you can probably make a case either way. So I'm being critical, but I'm being only just critical. I'm on the fence. It's probably a 55-45 split. And at the end of the day, I think in context, if it was one of the pivotal games, responding whether we stay up in the division or we make the playoffs or something like that, I'd probably be more critical. The fact that it's a third round FA Cup tie against the Premier League club, I'm more content to let it slide. But probably could have done better.
Fair enough. And then I guess the other player to give a shout out to as well was Tommy Huddleston, coming off the bench in this one to remind us of the quality that he has. And it's funny. It's one of those occasions where he's playing against Premier League opposition and he can just rise to that standard, and was probably the standout player on the pitch for both sides, really, once he came on, just reminding us what he's got in his locker.
Yeah, and just I think it might have been in the build-up to the Longman goal where he actually got a foot in and won the ball that kind of changed the momentum of the attack. It looked like we were going to be caught on the counter, and then he kind of, dawdled in as he does with his long limbs, and then got to the ball and then kind of started. So, look, as you mentioned, we know Tom Huddleston's got class, and that was never a question even when we speculated whether him being signed was a good move or not. For this particular playing group. But as you mentioned, we know the capabilities of him, but it was always a case of, can he get fit? Is he able to get himself onto the pitch, frequently, and have the type of influence in the dressing room that we hope he can. And so when you say, evidence of the Everton performance, then, there's definitely elements there that we know that there's still a player in there, and there's still a huge role for Tom Huddleston. It would be fantastic if he could stay fit and get as many minutes out of him for the run-in. I think that's certainly going to be the goal. I think we can't really make a comment on Tom Huddleston until this season's over.
That's right.
I look at him at a collective, amount of games. I think that there's always going to be the windows and the opportunities, as what we were privy to on the weekend. But let's have a revisit of Tom Huddleston maybe at the end of the season and give his report card and see was Huddleston the right signing at the time. More marks.
For me, it's definitely a case of Huddleston versus Davies. I mean, we sort of talked end of last season about the need to get an experienced centre half in, and Davies was almost saying, "Come and get me." And I look at the performances he's been in this season for Derby, and I think it's a hard call to make to say that Huddleston's performed better. But as you say, there's still a lot of the season to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other one, just very finally, before we move on from the game itself, Tom Eaves making that shot right at the end of the game that Begovic saved. We've already sort of talked about Eaves' performance, but you just think like that was the moment that could have got us to penalties, really. But what would you say on reflection? Probably a fair result in the end, even with those big chances that we had to equalise.
Oh, look, I definitely think that you can't have that, but the draw would have been probably the best result given how the game played out. But as you mentioned, how that ball was kept out is beyond me. Tom Eaves really did. he hit that ball from close range. It was a fantastic save, and it just would have been the icing on the cake for our man Tom Eaves to get that goal. Would have just been outstanding, but it wasn't to be. Look, I think it's probably about right. I would have preferred the draw, or better yet, but the 3 points, the ticket through to the next round. But ultimately, it probably was about right.
Yeah, definitely. We'll move on then. We'll talk a little bit about off-field news. Like we said last week, we're sort of holding off on the takeover discussion too much because we're hoping that once the takeover goes through, we'll be able to do a special episode discussing all of the details of that at that point. I sort of already alluded to, we had that interview with Acun come out overnight, promising surprises for the supporters, things like that. I don't quite know what to make of that. I suspect it's probably just, incentives to get supporters back into the ground, signings, all that sort of thing as well. But I guess the first sort of tangible or credible transfer news that we do have so far this window is Magennis' impending departure to Wigan on, I think, a 2.5-year deal. I suspect there'll be some sort of nominal fee, maybe around £100,000, £200,000 at a complete guess. But he's been a fantastic player for City. I think he hasn't had the goal scoring record he would have liked, or we would have liked at the Championship level, but he led the line very well in the League One last season and has been a great leader around the club.
Absolutely, and I think that as I reflect on his time, as a City player, he really surprised me with what he was able to accomplish last season. With all due respect, I think League One is certainly his level. I think that he really, really dominates League One. I think that the type of player he is, he probably doesn't have the best touch at many times, and particularly when he's not confident. There was so many moments where he gave the ball up really easily in the early days of his City career, which kind of made me think that he wasn't much of a player. I think when he went down to League One, he was really able to demonstrate those abilities that he has. He is a real physical presence. When he is playing with confidence, he's a very difficult striker to play against. I imagine that, you could interview many of the League One defenders last season that came up against him. There's a reason that he was so prolific and able to influence the games in the way that he does. He's very promising from the penalty spot too. I think he's got a really good record at taking penalties. And he, by all accounts, is a very well-respected leader as well. I know that McCann rated him very highly in the City dressing room. So, I don't think it's a massive loss in the sense that we don't have the personnel that are able to cover a player of Magennis' traits. However, I'd certainly think that he can be an asset elsewhere, and we do wish him well.
Absolutely, wish him very well at Wigan. Okay, then we'll move on to our triple flashback feature, and this is actually quite a tough one. I've sort of picked this one because we have just had an FA Cup fixture that did very nearly go to penalties. But I'm not going to hold it against you if you struggle to name any of these sides. I can give you some hints along the way. Maybe I can give you, I might give you the competitions first of all and see if that triggers anything, and then maybe the years that they occurred in, if that helps as well. But the question is, can you name the last 3 penalty shootouts that we have won? So to help, we did have a penalty shootout this season, but we lost it. So this is the last 3 penalty shootouts that we won.
Okay. I remember, I hope this isn't a false memory, I definitely remember beating Leeds in a cup tie, and I think that may have been a penalty shootout as well. That's the only one that's standing out. Now, I also remember, I feel like there's a Leicester in there as well, or maybe, or is it a green team? Look, the only one I'm pretty sure or pretty confident on is there's a Leeds penalty shootout that we won, and then I seem to remember, I think there's going to be a big Premier League club in one of these as well, or a big maybe it was a championship team when we were in League One as well. I feel like there's someone who we surprised in a penalty shootout, and then I think there's a really average team that we went to penalties with that I can't remember for the life of me who it was, but I remember being surprised that we were taken to penalties by them, and we did win, but it was really unconvincing.
Sorry. That's
all I can give you. You can give me a hint.
No, that was very good. So Leeds was one of them. That was correct. That was the one that went to, like, I don't know, 15 all or something. I think where the keepers were taking them. They were actually all 3. They're from last season. One of them's in the EFL Trophy, which I don't blame you at all for forgetting. That one was against Crewe Alexandra. I don't think you were going to get that one. The other one was from the first round of the League Cup last season. Do you have any sense of who we might have played in that one? So they were also a League One side, but they're a pretty big League One side.
No, it escapes me.
Sunderland. Yeah. So Sunderland on, like, the first day of last season. Okay. Because we had I think it was a penalty shootout win against Sunderland, then penalty shootout win against Leeds, and then lost to West Ham in the League Cup. But yeah, so all 3 from last season. And for a while there, we had a pretty good penalty record, and then lost it this season. But there you go.
I don't know why I feel like we've been in a penalty shootout with Leicester recently. When I say recently,
yeah, no, you did say that, and I was thinking about that because it does ring a bell for me as well. I feel like that was League Cup as well. Wasn't too long ago.
And the other thing that's perplexed me is what year that would have been. But it might be nice when we get off air to go through the archives and try and work out what this memory is that we're thinking of.
That's right, for sure. Okay, well, let's round things off then with the preview. We've got Stoke City this weekend. Second meeting of the season. Michael O'Neill's still in charge there. They've had a pretty poor run of things lately. They've had a lot of injuries taking out their personnel, as we would well know, with Harry Souttar out for the season with that ACL, unfortunately for Australia. They did win the first game 2-0 back in September. That was just in our awful run of form. I think I remember this game. It was just that sort of typical City looked good for 30 or 40 minutes of the game, looked like we could get something out of it. And then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, they scored. Vrancic got that goal where he sort of just weaved through the defense. And then I think Powell got the counter after we might have had, I think we had a penalty shout or something like that, as we seemed to. He just went down the other end and scored. But yeah, they've only got 1 win in their last 5 games. So certainly a gettable fixture, this one. How do you see it?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I remember this game quite well, actually. And was always going to be the case that Powell was going to score against us. But we've talked, I feel like I say that a lot. We've talked about this before, but it's certainly one of the things where I actually have a very different feeling in when I watch City now, as opposed to this period at the start of the season that you're talking about. We just look far more organised defensively. We look like we control the ball a lot better through the midfield, and we're not just getting into the final third with a sense of hope. I feel like when we get there, there's a lot more purpose, and because of the confidence and because of the recent run of form, granted, we've still had a couple of losses in the recent weeks. The fact that we have been able to show a different resilience about our play. And the fact that, you talk about Stoke, who are, somewhat on a slide, respectively, compared to how they were flying earlier on in the season. I think this is a huge opportunity for us. And, if you look down the table, even though we are reasonably safe, it's amazing how quickly you can get pulled back into, into the dogfight. And, on evidence of the Everton fixture, we are certainly now too strong of a team to be languishing at the foot of the championship table. I think the next couple of weeks are really crucial for us in making sure that we put ourselves in a position, particularly if we are, the sale goes through and there are going to be some new bodies come in and a few hopefully promising signings, and a signal of intent from the new owner. If that's going to be the case, we want to really, build some momentum now and catapult ourselves into the start of this year with a real spring in our step. And so even though you could probably go, until the sale goes through, we'll see what happens then. I think this fixture is a really important line in the sand moment for us. If we take 3 points against a very respected championship club in Stoke, I think it will set a really good foundation for what's around the corner. I really back us here. I'm confident. I think we'll get 3 points.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think we'll get the 3 points in this one as well. And I think you're completely right in the sense that, yes, we had those 4 wins in a row to sort of pull us out of the relegation zone and pull clear to an extent. And we were at a point where we went 1-0 up against Forest and we were looking at, how close does this get us to the top half or top 6 or whatever. And now, after a few bad results, it's actually a case of, well, we've actually got to look back over our shoulders and not kind of get too ahead of ourselves. We need to get a few more wins on the board, pull clear again of that relegation zone. And especially, as you say, if we're going to get a few new players coming in or trying to attract new players, you want those players to be able to look at the club and with certainty know that they're joining a championship club or at least a club that's very well placed to survive. You don't want to be sitting in the relegation zone trying to attract decent quality players who'll be saying, well, why would I join eventually in League One next season? So I think that's certainly an important step to take over the next few games. I guess from a personnel point of view, we sort of just talked about the ability that we saw from Tom Huddleston off the bench against Everton. And also talking about his potential fitness issues. So do you see him as a good option just to continue to use off the bench, or do you think that display against Everton puts him in the window for a start against Stoke?
Well, firstly, I think he's definitely in the window for a start against Stoke. I think that he's probably in the window for a start against any team if you know that he's fit and that if Grant McCann's looking through his team lineup each week, going, all right, who's the squad that I'm going to name? If he sees that Tom Huddleston's fit, then it's always a very strong possibility that he's gonna find his way. I think that's probably something that Grant McCann would be far more qualified to answer, given his thinking at the moment, having seen how Tom Huddleston pulled up at Everton, and also I guess what the longer term plan is for Tom Huddleston. When they signed him, was there an understanding that he was just going to be playing a bench role, or were they going to be sparing with how they used him, more so for cup ties to be in the background to help with the running of the club, coaching, just being a body with experience. Like, was that his role? I think that probably may also have some kind of factoring in. But look, I'd love to see Tom Huddleston start this game, but it will also depend on the tactics. What do we expect from Stoke and how are we going to play them? I think Tom Huddleston is a very unique set of skills. We know that we've spoken about his passing with both feet, and he can, pretty much put the ball anywhere on the pitch that he wants, and particularly his long passing. We also know that, he can be an effective defender for us who's sitting in the hole. So how they choose to approach that tactically, I think, will ultimately depend on whether Tom Huddleston is chosen to start or come off the bench. But I certainly, if he's fit, there'll be a role for him in the 90 minutes. I'd be surprised if that weren't the case.
Yeah, most definitely. And then one player we didn't really talk about with the Everton game was Randall Williams, who got a start. Looked quite good for that first half. He sort of tailed off a little bit. Probably hasn't got the fitness in his legs from players having regular starts. Another one that's probably put his hand up for a start in this game, particularly with Magennis leaving, Wilkes now injured for 8 weeks, which we haven't really touched on, probably suggests that we'll have something like Eves and Smith up top, or Longman in a forward position, which then opens the door for a Williams to get one of those wing-back spots.
wouldn't it be special for Tom Eves to find himself with a championship start, given the effort that he's been putting in lately? I think he's been knocking on the door for quite some time. I actually wouldn't be surprised to see McCann go that way. With Eves and Smith up front, that could be a very interesting new look outfit in the way that City line up. But wouldn't be surprised to see it, given what we've been watching in recent weeks.
Yeah, certainly. I think we're both backing the win in this one, which would be great to see. We've got Blackburn next Thursday, so what we'll do is we'll preview that one on next Wednesday's podcast. But until next time, hopefully seeing you quite soon for a takeover special, if that all goes through, fingers crossed. But until next time, thanks for joining me for this one, Logan.
My pleasure, Alex. Great to be here.
No worries. And thanks everyone for listening in. Until next time, come on, City.